like to call the meeting of the Maple Run Unified School District Board of Directors for December 20th, 2023 to order at 6:08 p.m. The meeting is located in the St. Albans County Educational Center Library, and we'll move on with the agenda. First item is agenda review. Are there any requests for any revisions? Hearing none, the agenda is accepted without objection. Next item is Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next item is the visitor section. Do we have any persons in the room that are visitors that are interested in speaking? If not, do we have any visitors on the Teams or Zoom or whatever that are interested in speaking?
Nobody yet, Nilda.
Okay. Well, I mean, they've had plenty of time because you guys were on the tour, and so there are a few extra minutes. So I guess we'll move on to the consent agenda. So there are two items in the consent agenda, minutes and the media packet. Is there any issues with it to pull them out individually, or can we accept them? Hearing none, the consent agenda is accepted without objection. Okay, reports to the board. The first report is the student board representative report.
Hello everyone, I'm Jacoby Soder. So last Wednesday we started the first of what we hoped to become will be a series of meetings with ZATEC Student Council. And next Wednesday, the Wednesday we get back from break, we're going to plan on doing FCS and SACS and meet with their student leadership teams. And one of the goals of the Student Voice Committee is to build a connection with the middle school student leadership teams. That way we can help them develop leadership skills and help them voice their concerns about the district and about policies, and then we can represent them fairly here. And we started that process last Wednesday. Me and Cooper met here during the school day with the student council, and we ran a compass activity project. And I think it helped them just kind of start getting into the mind of what can we do to start making change. And it was really great to see students from 5 through 8 there all invested in making meaningful and lasting change for the district.
Any other student want to report?
Yeah, we don't really have, I think that's about it for us this week.
Yeah, that was about it for us this week.
Okay, we're good. Thank you. Next item is the personnel and student enrollment data. And it's my understanding that Rebecca Greeno, Human Resources Director, and Bill Kimball, the Superintendent, are going to do this presentation. Am I right?
Yes, I think Becky's going to do the personnel piece of it.
Okay, take it away.
Hello. I am going to reference this document. The full-time equivalent is page 1. So we'll review the first 3 pages of this document, and then we're going to flip to the very last page of the document. I love data. I love what it can tell us, right? So all numbers referenced within this document are full-time equivalent, or FTE, not the number of bodies. So FTE, it's a unit of measurement that's used to represent the number of hours worked by a single employee during a work week. We're reviewing only locally funded positions during today's conversation. We're not including any grant-funded roles. I want to be clear about that. So this document, this first page represents FTE, and I've broken it out by positions of admin and mid-management, clerical, custodians and maintenance, paraprofessionals, professionals, and other. And then by building, whether it's BFA or central office, Collins Pearly, et cetera. Any questions on this data, on this page?
The only question would be, or just maybe in the future, if you could reference that with the population from each of the schools.
Okay.
Is there any chance we could make the font size like a little bit bigger?
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Please.
Just a quick question on, you mentioned that this doesn't include grant funded positions. Is that just for the sake of data consistency, or what's the reasoning for that?
For data consistency, and we don't know if all grants will be renewed going forward. So we wanted to provide
Okay.
the true data.
Okay, thank you.
The next 3 pages are, the next 2 pages are professional staffing. So the focus here is professional staffing. In the master agreement, it outlines professional staffing as teachers, and beyond that. So I wanted to show you in the starbursts on both of these pages are enrollment. At the bottom in the green banner is those open professional positions that we're searching for. And then in the blue bubble, cloud bubble here, it's the number of students per FTE. And what's interesting for me to note is that we're pretty consistent. It doesn't vary much between student per FTE by building. Questions on this data?
So this includes, it looks like at BFA, general instructional people, instructional improvement, instructional related tech. What exactly? Did I get that right?
Yes. So at BFA, we have the general ed instructors, we have the health office, we have positions that are related to technical education, phys ed, social studies, special ed.
So what is, halfway down it says instruction general, it's like 0.6 of an FTE. What's the
I
difference?
can get some clarity for you on that, for sure.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Just for, I think I know the answer, but I'm gonna just say it out loud to make sure it's obvious. I'm looking at the BFA schedule, or whatever, table, and under the third column, it says number of students per role. So if I look at trauma, and if I look at health, and those others that have no student per role, there's nothing contributing to that total of students from those areas, correct?
There are students that are participating in those classes. I need to.
But it's not a trade-off, like,
No.
you're not taking health, going to the health office and not being in a class instead, as
Correct,
far as where they're,
correct. It's
okay.
part of what the makeup of a professional staffing definition is.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Any other questions on these 2 pages? All right, let's go to the very back. the very last page, distribution of personnel. We thought this would be interesting information for you. We've broken out our personnel by major budget areas, what comprises our budget the most. And we have running the schools takes up 50% of our distribution, which equates to 298.82 FTEs. The next line item is special education, which is 33% of our major budget areas at 196.92 FTEs. NCTC, our tech center, is 4% at 26.68 FTEs, and business operations, which is comprised of admin, the business office, HR support, 20.7 FTEs.
Becky, I think we have a label problem on the 50%. For the first one, I think it's actually, when I look at the numbers here, I think something was off for that calculation for
Okay.
50%, so I think
We'll get that.
I think it's gonna be close to 60.
Okay.
I was gonna say, we're missing 10% off the chart.
Yeah, no, Charlie, I saw that right away too. I think there's an error in it. I know those FTEs are correct. They look very familiar from what we looked at before. It's the percentage calculation I think is off. So,
Thank you.
yeah. Are there any other questions for Becky or about the information presented? Okay. The other thing that's continued on your packet here is enrollment, and I want to tell you that some of the enrollments here were taken at different times. So if you go from one table to another that's on the enrollment, on this whole page, you may see some differences off by 1 or 2 or 3 students, and that can happen from one day to another. Enrollment snapshots, when they're taken, you can have we have different populations in the district. So on this first page, the top pieces, you'll see the historical enrollment by grade and a projection. We gave you the NESDEC projection earlier this year, but what we're projecting next year by grade for creating the budget that you'll be presented with tonight. Okay? We're using those numbers. And then you have a graphical representation of that, and the y-axis has been truncated so you can see more variability in the bars. If we started the y-axis at 0, you wouldn't see much differential when we actually did it. So we decided to cut that so you can see some of the differential. Below that are the grade level enrollments at each school. And you'll notice, and we'll talk about this on the next page, but you'll see between grades 8 and grades 9, there's a big jump, and that happens every year because of tuition students from other towns that come in. And then you'll see the enrollment below that, just that graphical representation of that same piece. You can see the dips where we have a dip in enrollment in grades 2 and 3, and some high spots, really in 6, 7, 8, 6, 7, 5, 6, 7, which we're projecting coming up into the high school. So, if I turn it over to the next.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So from grade 9, 10, and 11 at the bottom graph,
Yeah.
looks like over 250, and then for grade 12, it drops down to 200.
Yeah.
What is that attributed to? Is it?
Just population of what we have for kids. I don't have any way of saying
Okay.
that there's more or less. In the
Okay,
next
all right.
page, you'll see when you look at the tuition.
Yeah.
We're staying, in our 12th grade, we have, less tuition students than we do in the other 3 grades. There's
Okay.
44 versus 48, 51, 51. So,
First when I saw it, I was thinking it was a huge dropout. but-
yeah, it's not a huge,
Okay.
it's just so much there's a difference in the
Okay.
grade size. And actually, for the high school, trying to project that going forward, the 8th grade that's coming in, 8th grade for next year, we're looking, this year's 9th grade is about 260 kids, and we're looking at 230 as our projection for next year. So, on the back sheet, you see a demographic makeup, and one of the things that, we've done when we start to do demographic, we've decided to go with white and BIPOC, because when we start to split up more than BIPOC into other racial categories, we can't report anything that's 10 or less. And so we start to get into some of those attributes. And then you see the tuition students, and then the next thing you see down below that is that our pre-K 8s you'll see the number of sections at each school, the average size for each of the sections, the minimums and the maximums. So you can see kind of what we're looking at for class sizes. And then below that, by department at the high school, and there's 3 that should have asterisks on them, and that's design, tech, fine arts, and world languages. You'll see those numbers. The way that class size was calculated was the number of students enrolled divided by the number of sections. And design tech's a good one to talk about. So if we had woodworking, they might put woodworking 1, 2, or 1, 2, and 3 all in the same classroom at the same time, but they're different sections in the scheduling software. So I need to update you a little bit about, like, you wanna say what's the class size? It's not 9, there's multiple, but there's 9 per section, per the program of studies classes, but there's more than 9 kids in the shop at the same time. French 4 and 5 combined, and some of our classes combined. So, we're gonna get you better section numbers on that, like how many kids are actually in the classroom at the same time. So, I don't know if there's any questions or concerns or comments people have on this. But this is a lot driving what we're starting to look at when we look at the budget.
So Bill, is there a rule of thumb or a rule period or a law or something that dictates what the ideal number of students are in a classroom?
So the Vermont Education Quality Standards for K through 3 suggests that the average within the district is 20 or less. And for grades 4 through 12, that the average in all classrooms is 24 or less.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Could you please flip back to that last page that you just showed?
Do you want us to go down, Nilda, or what part of the
Yeah,
page?
just a little. Okay, good. Okay, keep going to the BFA section, please. Thank you, right there. So technically, you can't take the number of teachers and divide it into the number of students per department and get the class size, or?
So
Right,
so the math that we would be doing is saying technically most of the times, and this is why I was pointing out a couple of departments that combine classes within one classroom in the same period. What you would do is say, how many sections are there, and I'm just gonna use English. There's 76 sections in English. There's 1,140 students in English classes. That should get us to 15, somewhere around, we rounded up to the whole number, but.
Okay. So the number of teachers doesn't play into this part at all?
Well, it does, because if you think about it, and in the master agreement, we call for 5 sections to be taught per teacher. So if there's 76 sections, you should be able to divide that by 5 and say how many teachers we need.
Are there some students
Right.
taking 2 English classes?
There could be. but
Okay,
they would be
because I was just
counted-
wondering why
we-
there's 1140 and there's only 899.
Yeah, so there could be double, that's how many sections of,
Okay.
that's in there. And this is all straight out of our power school.
And just for my reference, have we ever upped the number of teachers we needed because of the number of students per department or that sort of thing?
I'm not sure what you're asking when you say upped.
So, let me just do it this way.
Yeah.
We have 509 students in business.
Yeah.
There are 3 teachers and 30 sections.
Yeah.
And that's an average of 17. Well, let's say there were 609 students, and that changes that math a little bit. There's a possibility it could change it enough to require another teacher or not?
It could. It could do that if it depends on what class size. And this board has not the board itself has not established a policy for class size while it's required. It's allowed the superintendent, in the policy allows the superintendent to set the class sizes and what we want to have for class sizes. That's what your current policy is.
Right.
So you could do it a
Okay.
couple of different ways. You could have class size, you could have increased teachers, depending on what the priorities of the board are or where they'd like to go.
So the corollary to that would be if the numbers went down, mathematically, the number of teachers might go down.
You could, yes.
Is that,
Yeah, that could happen as
Okay.
well.
thanks for humoring
No,
me.
I think you're asking great questions, Nilda, for everyone to understand how this works. When we're starting to look at enrollment and staffing, we need to look at how many kids are in a class and how many teachers we need for those classes and how much support personnel and how many we need to run the buildings. That's part of building the budget and which we have to look at. So I think it's not humoring, I think you're asking good questions to say, do I understand how the administration looks at this data and uses it to plan the budget for the next year?
Right. But I do remember a time, and I think it was before the merger part thing happened, that administration would come to the board and ask, they used to do this then because it was part of what they had to do. That's not as much needed right now. But they would ask to hire an additional, whatever, English teacher
Yeah.
because the numbers are so high. And they would use data like similar to this to sort of pitch their request.
Yeah. I do want to explain for the number of sections, some of those are semester classes and some of those are year-long classes. So, you know, when, Joanna, you were asking, is there 1,140? It may be, and I kind of had a look from some of the students down the table, so it could be like, Cooper, are you in since you're a junior, are you in 2 different classes for English?
I'm not for English, but last year I was in like 2 different classes for math, so I doubled up on.
Yeah.
Yeah, math I see, English I put.
Yeah, actually last year I technically was because I did an independent study, and I know that other kids double up on English too to get those credits sooner.
Sure.
Yeah, and I also know we have some semester English
Like-
classes and we have some year.
Like last year I did health online, so I was never actually like in it. Like, but it was through the school did it, so that might.
Oh, so somebody could be taking like a dual enrollment course.
I don't think.
No, like I
any of
did
these-
it online through the school. Like the school offers it, but I just took it on like an online course.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And those, I don't think any of those online represent any of those
Okay.
sections that are up there.
Yeah.
So, but I could check that out. I will check on that.
And some of this you also figure
But-
out the critical mass
Excuse me.
needed to figure out if you need to add or subtract.
Yeah, yeah, we have to look at these numbers and we have to look at the class size. And that's part of the staffing work. And I'll be talking about that a little bit later as we talk about the budget and the work that the leadership team's been doing.
Bill, this just reminds me, I've got a question I'm gonna ask you later
Yeah.
about staffing and budget and all that. And this is probably not the time to do that. I'll wait for the budget.
Okay, that'd be great.
discussion. Okay.
So just to follow up on what, I think Jacoby is his name said, the independent study is really a student and a teacher sort of designing a program, right? They design whatever, I don't want to say whatever, but they design the program or the coursework that they want to follow. And then they check in periodically with the teacher and all that, correct?
I think so, Jacoby, does that sound, but Jacoby, you were in an online course, right?
Yeah, that's kind of it. Like they already have it made based on the curriculum you learned in health, and then like they give it to you through Edmonton.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, and then you just like do it at your own pace. Like I completed it in like 2 weeks, and it would have taken me a whole semester to do it. So, yeah.
I know Sarah did an independent study when she broke her ankle for gym, and it was, she had to log a certain amount of exercise and do reports and all, it was kind of a semester long.
What I'll check on for, is what, if that online or independent study were included in those sections. My inclination is they were not, but I'll check on that.
And it sounds like none of those are incorporated in any of these numbers anyway.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, I don't think they are, but I wanna check.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't hear the first part of what you said.
That's
Thank
all right.
you. All right, anybody have any more questions on this enrollment details and personnel information? If not, I am going to turn this over to Susan, and she's going to start with the old business section.
So the first item under old business is the second draft of the FY25 budget. I'm gonna turn that over to you and Martha
Brianne.
and Brianne.
Yeah, so we, last time, we brought back the chart paper, and Martha and Bree are gonna explain how we get to taxes, with a new budget, and then afterwards I'll say a piece, but I saw a lot of people kind of engage in that, and then you liked what it was doing, so we're gonna try to replicate that same piece with what we have for the first actual, budget that's been put together with many hands, I should say. Martha?
Take it away?
Yeah.
Okay. So, in your packet, you have the budget packet, which includes five different pages. So I'll start with page 1. So page 1 is my cover sheet that I typically do every year. And the top piece, the first box on the cover page, is the information that was presented last board meeting. So there is nothing on the top section that changed. The only one little item that changed is the little green check mark under information still outstanding. And what I'll be doing as we bring different drafts is I will be indicating whether or not we've received any information via that little check mark process. So this draft is actually it's our first draft from the requests and the information gathered by the school employees, the administration in all the buildings, and leadership at the central office as well. So we're bringing forward this draft of an expenditure budget of $76,055,991, which represents a 9.55% increase over the FY24, our current year budget, expenditure budget. This draft gives us an education spending figure of $57,136,322. And I'll get to that when we get to the tax rate, if that works easier. It'll be easier. Yeah. And that represents, that 57 million represents an 11.89% increase over the current year. We have received some updated information on our long-term weighted ADM, which is the weighted student count. It's still not the final, but that figure at this moment in time is 3,992.67, which is slightly less than what we had in the first draft you saw. And that's representing an 11.8% increase over the recalculated FY24 long-term weighted ADM. So our student count has increased over what we would have used for FY24.
So when you say equalized pupil count, that's the long-term weighted?
Long-term weighted, yes. Yep. With that long-term weighted equalized pupil count, you divide that figure, you divide the education spending by that long-term weighted ADM to come up with your estimated per pupil spending, which this version of this budget is coming in at $14,310. which is 0.08% increase over the current year's education spending per student. So per student, we're pretty much exactly where we are for FY '24. The bottom part of this sheet just shows the updated breakdowns for the different areas that are represented in this budget. Showing, and also it shows a percentage of what that figure represents of the total budget. So just the wages is slightly less than 54% of the total budget at this point. Any questions on that part at this point? I'll move on to the next page if there isn't any questions.
So, Martha, I've got a question about staffing,
Sure.
and you can wait till the end, but, I was gonna ask Bill, how many staff members do we, have that we haven't hired, that we have on our,
That are open right now.
that are open, yeah, open staff positions that we haven't hired, and how does that affect,
So
how does
our,
that affect the budget?
yeah, so we're, the open positions that are in the budget right now, 1, 2, 3. There are 20 positions. They're a little under $1.6 million in the budget.
And that's already in.
That's in the
this.
budget.
They're in
Okay,
the budget.
all right,
They're in the budget.
gotcha.
That's total cost, salaries, pennies,
Yep.
everything. So it's about 1.6 million of open positions that's in the budget.
That's including, sorry, granted positions?
Nope, this is only
No, that's just
local cost.
All right, I'm just confused because I thought we just looked at,
We've done everything that you've had tonight, it's been all around local, it's been locally
if
funded.
this isn't 20 positions, it says open 2, open 2.5.
Right,
Open 4 points, so how does that?
That's current, so I think what
Sorry,
the positions that she was reporting on earlier is current year, current.
right? That's what Jack just asked, isn't it?
No,
no.
These are
No,
Yes, what was
positions,
in the budget.
they're open,
They're
they're
open
open positions for
They're in
next
the
year's
budget.
budget.
You would assume that those would be the same positions. Becky, when did you take the information that's on the chart?
About 3 or 4 weeks ago,
And the ones we have that you gave me today was today.
today.
Also,
Yes.
wasn't that chart just on professional staff? It wasn't,
Just
it was,
professional
it
staff.
wasn't the whole.
Yeah, it was only professional, I'm
Okay,
counting
all right, I'm
paraprofessional.
just
Yeah, this
trying to
is all
Yeah, no,
staff.
you're asking good
No,
questions.
that's a
I
good
want,
question.
I want to tie it out, because people say, wait a minute, you're not giving me the same numbers, how can this
Right.
be true?
So it's professional,
What I just gave you was professional, ESP, and non-union positions across
Which
the
could
district.
include custodians, which we're looking for custodians.
Custodians, paraeducators,
Secretaries.
homeschool coordinator, special ed direct, building director, school psychologist, I mean, I could keep
Yeah.
going.
yeah, okay.
I,
So, so if, in a perfect world where we have 100%, we are fully staffed, everyone that is not grant funded is in this budget?
Yes.
yes,
Okay.
Okay. Moving on page 2 and page 3 in your packet is just the breakout of the expenditure budget. And I think I went over this at the last board meeting, but it's broken out by different, like, kind of like departments, but it's not necessarily departments, it's more how we need to report out to the state. And I've added a little bit of extra information under each of the line items to kind of help you see what is included in those line items. If you have any questions, I can go over each individually, or you can look it over and send me questions at a later time or later in the meeting. The first page consists completely of regular education, so that's just and I wanna include, this budget includes grants as well. There are grant information in this expenditure budget, as well as, grant-funded staff that we are anticipating. So the second page at the top part is our, budget for special education. And then the bottom part on that is the Northwest Technical Center. Still haven't fixed that title, it's supposed to be clear. Even though the Northwest Technical Center budget is embedded in our budget, it's really a self-contained budget. It's a way that the state funds technical centers. Because it's housed in one of our buildings, we have to have it included in our voted budget. But you'll see when we get to the revenues that the expenditure amount in the tech center budget matches the revenue part of the tech center budget. So it's really a self-balancing, and there's a separate tuitioning process for that program as well. So the fourth, any questions on the expenditure parts? Okay. Yes.
I don't know if this is a question to ask now, but, is the reason for the drop in pre-K, is that just numbers?
So pre-K is always, it's interesting to try and figure out, because the cost between the regular education of pre-K and the special education of pre-K is all determined on the actual number of students that are in the program. And it's
You're just
done,
guessing at this point.
it's a percentage, yes,
Okay.
so,
Yep.
so if it typically, if it drops in the regular education, and you look on the top of the second page, you'll see that the special education piece of it went up, and
Okay.
it's dependent on the number of
Great.
students and the
Thank you.
IEP needs. Okay. The fourth page is the estimates of revenues, and at this point, there are still quite a few numbers that are ballpark guesses at this point, especially the ones that are in the yellow boxes. But some of the other numbers are still variable at this point. But I need to come up with some estimates to be able to get to the tax rate calculation, which I know you're all waiting to see. But the number in the box, the 57,136,322, is the number that I indicated on the very first page of the cover sheet. That's the education spending figure. We get that education spending figure by taking all of the revenues on this page under the FY25 proposed budget, excluding that figure in the box, and that gives us a figure of 18,919,000. And the difference between that figure and our expense budget is the number that goes in this box, education spending. So basically, it's
I have a
this,
question.
yes,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
No, I caught you in the middle of the sentence. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say the amount that's in that box is the amount that we're gonna receive from the education fund.
Okay. I'm wondering why in the FY25 proposed budget, in your estimates, so the ones that are highlighted in yellow, why the figure actually decreased from the FY24 working budget? I mean, are we anticipating that it's going to actually go down in price, or should we use the actual number? The actual number is quite a bit lower, so, right? But it's the previous.
Which number are you looking at?
Oh, I'm looking at, let's see, that's regular education,
Yep,
and, for example, EEL.
State grant?
Sorry. No, wait, not a good example. Pre-K IDEA,
so,
there's 21,000 in the yellow box.
right,
And then the column before that has 22. And it's not a big difference, but I'm just surprised that the numbers are going down instead of up.
well,
the same?
That's one of the areas where I'm waiting for the information to come. And at this point, I'm using what we were awarded in FY '21 as the FY '24 as the original allocation. The FY '24 working budget may have been adjusted by grant adjustments. So we may have gotten additional funding at some point. So at this,
Okay,
so I don't know, so I'd rather at this point lowball park it until I get a better number.
no, I'm satisfied, you explained it, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I've got a question, on your out-of-district placements. Let's see, where was I looking at that?
On expenditures?
I went down because I was, regular ed, out-of-district,
Yeah, page 3 of the
I think you're on page 3.
expenditures.
It's page 3 is where it has.
Yeah, out-of-district
out-of-district
placement, there it is.
placement, Yes.
It looks like in 2 years, that cost almost doubled. It went from in '23, like 918,000 to 1,978,000.
And in '23, in FY '23, there was a lot of, places that were no longer accepting,
That was COVID.
students.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
And their, staffing levels were a lot lower than they typically had been as well, so they weren't accepting as many students, as what we had needing to be outplaced at the time as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
To follow up on that.
And the cost has gone.
To follow up on that, is there a way for us to see what we've saved? Because we were definitely presented that we would be saving money as far as out-of-district placement because of our, the money that we invested in the alternative program. Has that come to?
That has come to fruition for those students, for the students that are accessing that program. Our number of students seeking outside placement has risen quite exponentially.
And this particular line item is for special education purposes only. And, agree, our request for outside placements has increased exponentially.
So that intended goal did not.
No, it's,
No.
for the population that was intended, it's working.
I'm not suggesting the program's not working. I'm talking about the savings. that-
So the savings for that, for the group of students that could access that program, that is happening. There are other students that would not be appropriate for that program, but need other outside placements, and we're needing
And
those.
those numbers have increased.
And those numbers have increased.
So if all the students were to go outside placement, it would be much higher than that, is what I think what Bill
Yeah,
means,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, It's just a good, it would be, just a good thing to see.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Any more questions on the?
As we're making decisions.
So, just for clarification, is out-of-district placement considered residential, or is it daily travel?
Can be both.
Could be both. Most of it is daily travel.
Yeah, most of it's daily, but it can be both.
Yep.
But that is quite expensive for the daily travel part, because the family isn't necessarily doing it. It could be someone that you hired to do it, or even if the family is doing it, they probably have to get reimbursed due to special ed rules or something,
That's actually correct.
That's correct.
you know? Okay, thank you.
Any more questions on expense and revenue? Okay. Now we'll get to the fund page, the tax rate page.
I'll have a question, I don't need it answered right now, but
Okay.
at some point, can you just explain how there's two sections for special education, just in terms of the block grant, and then the special education pre-K through 12. Again, not, right?
Are you talking about expenditures or are you talking about revenues?
Oh, expenditures.
So, page.
Yes, don't listen to me.
Okay.
Forget it.
Okay.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So, on my modeling tax rate page, as I explained the last time, the box on the left is the current year FY '24 information, just so that you have it for comparison purposes. The information in the block, oh, I'm sorry, it's sideways, isn't it? The right-hand side is the information for this budget that's being presented. So we start with the long-term weighted ADM count that we've just recently received, which is the 3,992.67 students. We start with our expense budget that we're presenting, which is $76,055,991. From that, you're going to subtract the local revenue, which, as I indicated when I was talking about the revenue sheet, it's all the estimated revenues except for the number that's in the box, which ends up being at this point, I'm estimating $18,919,669. That gives us our education spending of $57,136,322. Once you have your education spending dollar figure, you divide that by the long-term weighted ADM count, which is the 3,992.67 weighted students.
So it's gone up almost 400 students compared to last year.
Correct. At this point. That gives us our education spending per long-term weighted ADM, which is $14,310 at this point, which is $12 over FY '24, or the current year. We then apply the yield, which is the figure that we get from the tax department, and we've received the estimated yield to be 9,452 at this point. We received that on December 1st. We take the yield, we take the education spending per long-term weighted ADM and divide it by the yield to come up with your education tax rate. So this budget as presented right now, this draft with the estimated revenues we've gotten here, we're coming up with a education tax rate of $1.514 at this point. This represents an 11% increase over the current year tax rate.
Is the yield lower than last year, or is it more than last year?
Well,
Yeah, that's right.
it's definitely lower.
Okay.
They gave us an estimated yield for last year to use because they had to recalculate everything last year, because last year the weighting of students was done differently, and so the student weights were different, and so the yield was different. So they had to adjust the yield because of the new weighting formula.
Okay.
They have a lot more weighted students than they did in prior years, so they had to drop the yield to come out with the same figure. And so I don't have here what the estimated yield was, but it was higher than the 94.52. I think it was 98 or something.
You mean the conversion one,
Yeah,
not
the
the actual
conversion one.
yield?
Yeah, the conversion
Yeah,
one.
it was higher than the 94,
Yeah,
so it has dropped.
And that's still estimated.
it's still
That
estimated.
still could rise.
It still could rise and it could still drop.
If
That
it drops,
figure,
that would be,
yeah. The yield won't be finalized until the legislature just before it adjourns, because it's the last bill that gets passed. And they need to wait for all the school districts to have voted and approved budgets by the taxpayers. That information gets submitted to the Agency of Education, which then turns the information over to the tax department, so they can calculate how much money they have to generate. So that yield has to flow, and once they have the final figures, then they can figure out what the yield has to be set at.
So in the past 5 years or so, and again, we don't have this information right now, has the yield on the estimate,
It's gone either way.
it's gone either way?
Yeah.
So it's made a substantial impact.
Some years it benefited us,
Right.
and some years it didn't, but when it didn't, it wasn't huge. But this is the first year with these new weights, and they're feeling their way through it,
Yeah,
so.
because it's almost like we're doing okay until
Yeah.
we get to the yield.
Yeah.
And we won't know that until.
Right, exactly.
So
Martha, can you please state, oh, sorry, go ahead.
you can ask Dilda.
Can you please state again the math you used, just the, what divided into what, to get education tax rate?
Sure. So you
You don't
divide,
have to go through how you derived all the numbers, just that last two things.
okay. You divide your long-term weighted ADM student count into your education spending. That gives you your ed spending per weighted student. You then divide the yield, divide that number by the yield. So the 14,310, you divide it by the 94.52. That gives you your tax rate of $1.51.4. Actually, it's $1.51.399 something or other. So I rounded it. So if we
Thank you.
had, so if we went with the education tax rate and there was no 5% cap at this point, we would then go to the common level of appraisal and make that adjustment, do that adjustment. So starting with the $1.51.4, you would apply the common level of appraisal percentage, which right now we don't have the new ones yet. We received notice from is it the tax department?
Tax department.
That they're behind and they're not gonna be able to get that information to us until first part of January, which typically we usually get it by mid-December. And so they're behind. So we're using last year's common level of appraisal adjustment percentages for this exercise. So for city, the CLA is at 71.27%. So you take the $1.51.4 and divide it by the percentage of 71.27, which then would give you an adjusted tax rate of $2.12 and change. That's the figure that you would see on your tax bill if this was a final, everything was final. That's what you would see. For town, that percentage is 87.51%, so the $1.51 would then calculate out to be $1.73. And for Fairfield, because they've recently reappraised, their percentage is over 100%, so they're at 128.5%. So when you divide the $1.51 by the 128.5%, you end up with a tax rate of $1.17 and change.
So, but these are
These are last year's percentages.
last year's, had they finished the audit, or the reappraisal by,
No one's done reappraisal except for Fairfield in the past few years. City is gonna try to get it done for the next, won't reflect in our pieces till FY '26.
so is this 128, so in Fairfield, the common level appraisal is 128.5%?
That was last year's percentage.
That was-
We haven't gotten this year yet.
Okay.
So typically, that percentage will go down a little bit each year.
So, and what this means though is, last year, the houses in Fairfield were selling for a lot less than they were actually appraised for, which is why our
No, they were selling for more than what they were appraised for.
And that's fine.
Wait, okay, no,
No,
no, no,
for-
with the
for
new
Susan's
appraisal,
right.
right, with the new appraisal, you're
Yeah.
right, sorry,
Okay.
sorry.
They were selling
I was
for
thinking of
less
the-
than what they were appraised for?
So that's what, so
That's
that's
why,
what this
that's what the
means.
128% stands, means.
So they were selling less than, so the common level appraisal is when it's above 100%, that means our taxes go down.
Yeah.
It means like in city, they were selling at a lot less than
A lot
a lot more than they were appraised for, so those taxes go up.
Right.
And so I'm just surprised at Fairfield at 128%
Yeah, and we get these,
that
we
they
get,
were selling for that much less than they were appraised for.
and that's what the tax department collects the information from
Yeah.
actual sales over 3 years and does an average according
Okay.
Right.
of where the
Okay.
assessments are versus what the sales were for 3 years. So don't think of just 1 year, it's an
Right.
average
Okay.
of 3 years.
All right.
So that's without the cap,
That's
right?
without the cap. So if we were to present this budget at this point in time, we would in fact, reach the point where we would get the 5% cap on the tax rate. And that 5% cap on the tax rate would change our tax rate from $1.51 to $1.43. $1.43.07. Now, if we were to take that figure, that new capped tax rate, and apply the same percentages for the common level of appraisal, we would start with city with the $1.43 divided by the 71.27%. That tax rate would change and be $2 and a penny, rounded. For town, you would apply the 87.51%, and you'd end up with a tax rate of $1.63. And for Fairfield, you'd apply the 128.5%, and you'd end up with a tax rate of $1.11 and change. That's how the tax rate is calculated once you have a voted and adopted budget. And you get final numbers on the equalized pupil counts, the yield is set, and you end up with a tax rate, and the CLA percentages are updated and renewed. And then that's how you would end up getting a final tax rate that you would see on your tax bill.
All right, so I have a question.
Okay,
Going to this very,
go for it.
the very top box here on
Yes.
the, so FY '25 estimates. So
Yes,
starting, so we've got the budget expense
yeah,
of
which is still an
76.
estimate, which is
Okay,
a draft.
that estimate.
Yep.
And then we've got the local revenue, which is again an estimate.
Mhm.
We subtract the local revenue from the expense budget,
Yep,
and we come up with the educational spending, which is 57.
correct.
And then we divide that by the weighted pupils to
Yep.
come up with what's the ES stand for?
Education spending,
Tax rate, and that's
Yep.
14.
Yep.
And then we subtract the yield from that,
no, you divide the yield.
divide the yield.
Yep, you
That's
divide the
division mark,
14,310 by the
Okay.
yield.
And that comes with the educational tax rate. That comes,
Yep.
how you come up with the educational.
Yep.
I don't know if you can answer this in a very short period of time, but what again is what's the yield again? I think I have it, but I'm not totally sure. Like, what is the yield?
So it's a way for the state to calculate what $1 of a tax rate would give you. So if we're saying, maybe I'll let Bill,
Let me go for it.
you go for it.
So,
I could do it, but
Yeah.
it'll take me a minute.
So they look at the grand list for everyone in Vermont.
they look for the grand list of everyone in Vermont, and they say, they estimate, in November, they collect an estimation from all the business managers from all the districts of what they think the education spending is, and no school at that point has their budgets developed.
Right.
It's just an estimate of where they think the budgets are gonna come in.
Mhm.
So they say, we think we have so much spending, and they say, if we took the grand list and divided that, and so it's called a dollar yield. So if we had a dollar tax rate on the grand list, how much money would we get per long-term weighted average student? And when you do that division, you get $9,452.
Right.
The grand list is a big estimate, the budgets for education spending is a big estimate, the weighted students at that point
Right
is an
now, it's
estimate.
still an estimate.
And so when the tax commissioner is required by law to put this out as an estimate of what the yield's gonna be, it's all built on other estimates. That goes into the legislature, and then to give you some more of the, sorry for this euphemism, but sausage grinder that goes into all this, because there's so many factors, you can't really see all the variables. This goes into the House Appropriations, usually the first one to start with it, and they start talking about where do we want the tax rates to fall? How much money do we want to collect in Vermont? How is that going with the general fund versus the education fund? And they start to look at this, and this number gets tugged and pulled and moved through that process. And the reason it's the last bill is because the general spending and education bill for all the taxes for Vermont is the last thing they do before they close the legislature. And it usually is the day before they close that this is approved, and then the governor can sign it or veto it after that.
And we have to vote on a budget
And
long
we have
before
We
that.
always-
way
we
before
always
that,
do.
so we've had this for a
Right.
year, since Act 60.
Mhm.
This has been the system, so since 2001, of having to deal with all these estimates and not
Yeah.
knowing actuals.
And to put it in another frame that might help. So if our education spending per equalized pupil came in at $9,452, if our 14,310 actually was 9,452, our tax rate would be $1.
Okay.
So the 9,452 is equal to $1 of spending. And so our spending at this point, we're saying, is 14,310. So that dollar has to increase to $1.51 to generate that money. Does that make sense? Does that help a little bit?
A little bit,
A
yeah.
little bit? Okay.
Still working on it.
Yeah.
Sorry, it is, Vermont's system is one of the most complex, it's been rated this in the nation. It's
Yeah.
one of the most complex tax systems in the nation.
Yeah,
I wish it were easier, but
right.
it is what we have.
My theory is they have made it so complicated, nobody understands it.
Yeah.
You know, but for me, when people ask me about, you know, why do schools cost so much, or why is my tax rate so high? When I hear those things from the public, they don't realize that this formula is based on all the spending in Vermont. And then they make these formulas out of what schools cost across the state, not your local school. In the old days, your local school costs there was a direct formula to what your tax rate and what your spending would be. Well, it's no longer that. And that's probably the biggest thing, the most difficult thing for people to understand.
It's a statewide
And even
funding.
though
It's
I've been a
state-
superintendent and I've studied this stuff for years, I still get confused, you know? And so
Yeah.
my neighbor, who owned a widget factory and never was a school person or whatever, for that person to understand it is real difficult.
Yes.
And they just think, you know, why are so many kids going in the morning in buses, and when they come home, there's half the kids? Well, because they play sports. But you have to explain all that kind of stuff. And they think you can, in the middle of the day, chop the bus in half or something. But, you know, all those kinds of, and they're good questions that the people ask, you know, but the biggest thing they don't understand is we're a victim of what everybody else is spending, not just our own spending. So we just need to remember that. Well, thanks for, you're doing a great job.
Try.
I have a question about just sort of the messaging that's coming out of Montpelier regarding budgeting.
Yeah.
Basically, I believe it was last month or something, we had the governor's office give a, you know, basically a warning about skyrocketing property tax rates, and they cited up to a 12% increase in education tax as a factor in that. Looking at the sheet, if we didn't have that cap, or the 5% cap, then we would be coming close to that 12% number. But in terms of what the taxpayers are actually going to feel this year, am I missing something, or did Montpelier just like ignore the cap that they put on the tax? Or am I just completely misreading the messaging that the government has put out?
Well, Charlie, that came from the governor's office, and the tax commissioner, so, I'm gonna reserve kind of comment on that. I will tell you that, one of the things that it was accurate, that right now there's about that estimate from November, which I said was an estimate, that's where they got it from, it wasn't actual budgets, is about 12.8% increase in spending, and that communication said up to 18 to 20% increase in tax rates. I don't know if they ignored the 5% or not, I can't comment because I didn't do their calculations. I could tell you that in talking with other superintendents, there's quite a few of us in the Champlain Valley that are recommending to our boards to take advantage of this 5% cap. Because we do know that what we've been told by the legislators is that there is money set aside to make up the differential between the cap and what actual spending is. What I'm concerned about, and I know some of my colleague superintendents I can say are concerned about, is the rating of the ed fund that's happening with lots of other spending, and that as spending goes up, there'll be there'll be more and more schools that have to use this 5% cap because the yield will become lower and lower. It's almost a circular effect. I'm not sure how many of us understood the downward pressures that Act 127 was going to put on some school districts. There's probably about, I don't have the actual number and I can go get it for you from the estimate from what Brad James said us, but there's more than 50% of the schools that are going to have additional tax burden because of the new weighted student system. I know I'm not answering your question directly because I don't want to speak on what came out of the governor's office because I think that was his message to give and I wasn't part of it.
That helps inform me a bit though.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, the 5% cap on tax rate, is there a risk that basically, is there a risk that the rug gets pulled out from under us where, we think that we've got that and then it turns out actually that doesn't, that's not there?
So right now it's in law that if we go over that 5%, the only way we get this 5% cap is by going, for any time between now and FY29, is by going over 5% this year. So we'll then be able to use it any other year that we need it, but if we don't use it this year, that's in the current law. I think that.
If we don't use it this year, then we won't ever get it.
We'll never get it, but it doesn't mean we have to use it in other years. It just means your first year you have to be into the 5% cap. You have to use it. The other piece.
So,
go ahead.
Oh, and it seems like, given the amount that our costs have increased, it seems like it would take, it would take massive cuts in order for, even if we wanted to get under the 5%, it would take massive cuts across the board to do that.
Well, I was about to address that for you, yeah. Now, that's a really good question, so thank you, Charlie, kind of leading to where I was going to go. And I said this, and I gave you all some prep material in my bi-weekly update, because I wanted you to have time to read it, and then for me, I'm going to say a lot of what I said in my email to you. But the budget you were just presented to you, well, first of all, so I want to do this. I should stop. First of all of you, thank you for thanking Martha and Bree. They've done a lot of hard work. But there's a lot of other people that go into this hard work. They help lead the process, but it starts with our teachers. And when we develop budgets at our schools, and they have input into what's happening in budgets at their schools, to our department heads, and then all the leadership team, and there's many support personnel that actually put the numbers together, and then that comes into Bree and Martha's work. So there's a huge team effort on this, and I just want to say thank you to all of them. They do great work, and they work really hard at it, and they have a lot tied up into these numbers. So we'd like to think budgets are just numbers, but there's emotion connected to those budgets, and we should realize that. So, as we've said in this, something I sent you a pie chart that showed that 74 or 75% of this budget is personnel cost. The other part is other costs, whether it be tuitions, transportation, building operations, the running of the administration of the district, which I classify as human resources, fiscal services, superintendent's office, and curriculum. So there's a lot in there, and as you were starting to allude to, Charlie, this budget is a 9.5% increase on the expenditure, or about 6.6 million, which is increasing our education spending a little over 6 million. And that gives us almost a 12% increase, 11.8%. But what's really interesting to me, and this became an aha last week, and I haven't asked Martha, so she can, please, or Bree, they should comment here. Our education spending per weighted pupil really hasn't changed. And so I think about the old system where it was directly related to the equalized pupils. It's different weighting, it's not the same. I believe, and we've had, a couple people asked about the change in the yield. The change in the yield is what's really changing our tax rate here. Okay, it's a change in the yield. And it's doing it to others too. I don't want to say, we're not alone in that. This tax cap, it's a 15-cent increase without the cap, and it's a 9, as you just saw, it's 9 cents in cities. With the cap, it's a 9.5 cents in cities, 7.8 in town, and 5.3 in Fairfield. If we wanted to cut the budget, you wouldn't, and using the caps, just to start to cut the tax rate at all, before you start impacting how far you want to go below that 5%, $3.1 million would have to be cut out of the budget. So I just told you that, let's use the number 75% as personnel. So let's say 75% of that 3.1 million. So let's say it's 22.5 million. That's about 70, sorry, I did do some of these numbers ahead of time, but that is about 75%. Well, I did also, I sent you an email and said it's about $100,000 per every teacher is the actual cost of a teacher. I asked Martha to actually give me the actual average today, and it's $104,000 and change is the total cost for a teacher, and for a para-educator, it's right around $50,000.
Salary and benefits.
Salaries and benefits, salaries and benefits. So if we said, we'll do across the board, it's almost a 4.5% cut to get to that 3.1 million. If we said, cut everything, 4.5%, and you just divide it by the teacher number, and I wouldn't want to do this, but I'm just trying to give you some realization. We're looking at 22.5 to 23 positions across the district. That doesn't mean it would be all teachers, but I'm just doing some simple math here, okay? I'm trying to alert you to what the drastic needs, and we still wouldn't touch the tax rate.
And I just wanted to just kind of add a footnote to that in terms of, I assume a cut like that would be, obviously severely devastating on a lot of levels. We had, we're kind of limping across the finish line to keep our schools open due to staffing issues right now. So if we were just to say 4% of the jobs are gone, then we would realistically be at risk of not being able to open schools on some days. Am I correct?
In the way we're currently organized. We've been looking at this as a district, and the whole leadership team we had to clear our calendars yesterday, and some of the work that we've been doing with the district management group has been looking at, we'd have to severely reorganize the whole system. And that would mean losing opportunities for kids and the goals that the district and the community has. We'd have to see if we can meet those, but we'd have to do a severe restructure of the whole system. Not that it couldn't be done, but it would be done rushed and probably not with good decisions.
Did you? No.
I have just one more quick question. So a couple meetings ago, you had mentioned the 10% cap, where if we go over that, then we wind up getting looked at by the state, and that's per student, that's
That's a
the
per-
educational
yeah,
spending
yeah.
per student?
Yeah, that's a cap that's only on the amount we spend per student, and since we're flat, we're nowhere near that 10% increase.
Okay, so we feel like very confident that we're not gonna touch that, correct?
Yeah, we're not gonna touch that.
Okay.
Joe, so you had, you said a few minutes ago, we have 10.5 roughly professional staff positions that are not currently hired.
I'd have to count this right here.
I did.
I have to count what I have in front of me for what's open, but
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I counted what.
what Becky gave me, so I'm gonna go that that's probably right.
And then, but then you said there was about 22 positions, not just professional staff, so both professional
Yeah, I
staff
did a
and
quick count of this
non-professional
sheet,
staff.
which I have them all on there, yeah.
Okay. I was just wondering, did you look at what that
That's one point,
total comes to?
it's 1.6 million.
It's 1.6 million.
But we'd have to cut
We had 3.1 million to get below the cap.
to get below the cap of 5%.
1.6 million for 22 positions?
Yep.
How does that happen? If you've got 10.5 professional staff, that would be 1.5 million.
So we had them all estimated what the costs are. They range from 126,000 to 68,000 because we had to assume a full benefit package
Yep.
in those. Yep.
Okay, I guess I thought the number would be higher.
I trust the math that's on here, so.
Yeah. No, I know.
When we say the average is 100,000 for professional staff, they're not all at 100,000.
I
There's some
understand
that
that.
are less than that.
Right,
Okay.
but if 22 people are only 1.6.
No,
10
people.
No, 20, I'll count again, but I mean,
Because you just said a couple minutes ago that would be taking away 22 professional staff. So I'm
I
just
didn't
trying
say
to
professional, I said staff.
Okay, so if we have 22 staff, then how is it not the 3 million that we're looking for?
No. Oh, he was
I'm sorry.
applying 4%. 4% to the 3 million.
I was doing 4% to 2.2, if I take 75% of our overall budget is staffing costs.
Right.
And we need 3.1 million, and we did a direct across the
That
line,
would be
the
22
percentage,
people, you said.
it'd be about 22 to 23 people. I
Right.
said if they were all professionals, if they were all professionals, it'd be 22 to 23 people. The number I'm looking at here, and I lost my count, I just did, so I'd have to count it again, sorry. When I look at the total, because more than, of the positions open, more of them are ESP position, custodial positions, than they are professional positions.
Okay,
It equals about 1.6 million.
okay, right, and I guess I would have thought that it would have been closer to 2, is what that's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Any other questions? So, I think that, my question is, what do we need in terms of, I would say, board education, so we can, because we're gonna be asked questions about this, so, what do we need from Bill and Martha and Brian in terms of education, so that we have a better understanding of this? We're gonna go forward, like, especially with some of the community engagement, and, so I guess I want you to think about that, to see if we need any, not necessarily more board meetings, but,
Well, our job
Okay.
is really to be looking at what our board goals are and our district goals are, and for us to be able to say, we want to make sure we're preserving these areas, and this is where we're comfortable if cuts need to be made, this is
Yeah.
where it would be, because that's what our job is, to influence them, and then they do, all the fine detailed
Right.
work.
but we're still gonna, get questions from the community,
Right.
and wanna be able to have some understanding of, thank you very much, what it means. So if people need more education about what the budget is and what the terms are and how we've come to this budget, we can ask, the staff to help us out with that. So something to think about.
I guess my first question, Susan, is the board at a place of saying, this is the budget we're going with, knowing that we have the cap rate, or is it something else? Because, as we said, this was gonna be a very fast and quick budget year, and if it's gonna be something else, we need to know. All the leadership team has asked me what we're doing for meetings, and I said, that's really gonna hinge on tonight. And are we working other days? What, am I pulling everyone together for another day? Is it, you need something different, you need other information about what's in the budget? We're willing to do the work, it's, I need to know the direction from the board, and I'm recommending what we're giving you. I'm behind it 100% and suggest that, but I also know that the board, you have the role of saying it's a budget in which the community can afford, and I need your guidance on that as a board.
So I guess the way I look at it is, you know, thinking about what you said in terms of what does the community want, and what do we want from our educational system, and knowing what their goals are, what our goals are, and I guess understanding that we're gonna have 5 years to get that budget back down. Like, so if we're at 8% or 9% this year, we just need to make sure, we need to be having really thoughtful discussions. So what does it look like next year? Because we can't present another budget at 8%, and, you know, I just don't, I couldn't necessarily, so what do we have to do to get it back down? And we've got 4 years to, well, we don't have 4 years to figure it out. That needs to be figured out in the next year or two, to make sure that increase comes back down to the 5% level.
What are you getting that 5-year thing from?
So it is the cap, so the cap's good for until 2030. So.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I missed that. I thought
So
it was
it's
only good
basically
for-
5 years, so, yeah, so for the next 5 years, if we don't take it this year, then next year, if our budget really is at 8%, then we're gonna be paying the 8% versus the 5%. But we have to have it back down to make sure that it's no more than 5% in 2030, otherwise we're making up for that in the end.
Right, that's why if we accept this recommendation that's coming through, we have more time to do a more thought-out process to get there. Correct, Bill?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, and one of the things that I didn't get a chance to say is we came together as a team, and we're starting to look at how we're structured and our staffing that we have, and our staffing ratios, and what where are HR efforts, where are human resources and where their efforts are, and how can we look, we're looking at other states and how they're structured. And that's happening not just in this district, that's happening in most of the districts in Vermont. I know of 34 of us that are doing that work right now, and saying, so how can we restructure the system? But restructuring the system in 2 weeks versus 18 months, I know we'll make a lot of errors in 2 weeks than we would in 18 months.
The other thing I wanted to say is, and I'm sure you all know this, but there are people in this community that are still waiting to feel what we promised them when they, went to MRUSD, right? Because we had that 2%, 2% for 5 years, and now we're even higher than we were then. So they don't realize any savings, and I think the board recognizes some savings for sure, but I don't know if the public necessarily does, because they just look at their tax bill, right? So depending on where they are in the season of life, people more, wherever they are. I think we're gonna get a lot of questions about this, for sure.
My understanding though is, and I'll get to you, is that if we look at our tax rate compared to 5 years ago, compared to this past year, it hasn't changed at all. Even though we had 10%, 8%, 6%, 4%, 2%, when it was gone, that tax rate was the same as it was when we started. So it wasn't our tax rate necessarily that went up, but all these other influences changed, you know, the common level of appraisal, the yield, the fact that it's really a state-funded system. So I think that's also part of the message.
Yeah, and I think that's what we have to get good at messaging.
Yeah.
To show, you know, what we've gained in addition to what's going on.
Joe, you had something?
So Martha, if we were to go, is there, and forgive me if this is what you meant by the 4%.
Go ahead, go.
Okay? If we tried to get on the cap, right, the
Yeah.
1.43, tried to bring that back to 1.36, is that your 4%?
No, I'm not even there yet.
No.
No, it's a lot more than that.
All right, because I mean, just like simple math is sort of like 0.06, like, so what would that, if we tried to get,
What's
So there, what
what's
would
the
that
cut
look
to
like?
get the tax rate the same as last year?
What did I tell you?
with the cap?
No, you don't,
No,
you're
you
way
don't
below
get
the
the
cap.
cap.
The cap won't even be in effect.
If you go below 5% of last year's tax rate, you will not get the cap.
You will not get it.
Okay, so then I'm not asking for that then.
Okay.
I'm asking for, with the cap that gives us 1.43,
Yeah,
Yeah.
if we came to 1.36,
So,
0.06%. So I don't know what that would be in terms of,
so I don't know but I think I don't know if you're confused or if I'm saying something wrong here. So the way the cap works, if your increase is more than 5% of last year, then you get that amount.
right,
The cap goes away if you go below that. So
I
what I
understand.
hear you saying is, what's the amount of dollars that we could change, what would be the change this year if we stayed at a tax rate of $1.36? Is that what you're asking?
not before the cap. I'd have to figure out, we'd have to figure out
There's nothing, so the cap, once we go below $1.43, there's no longer
there's
a cap.
no longer a cap.
once we go below
$1.43. And the spending, to get to $1.43, actually, if you look up what Bree wrote up there, let's forget there's a cap for a minute.
Hold on,
Yeah, our tax rate right now is $1.51 with the
Yep.
budget you're showing.
right,
Because of the cap, we could spend $1.60, make it $1.60, $1.70, $1.80, we still would be charged $1.43.
oh, okay, so 143 is the baseline, it's not with the, okay.
So
okay,
we're
that's
never
fine.
gonna, because
Never
there's a
going to
cap,
get to that
we're not
point.
gonna get up to that point.
Okay,
So that differential, remember the graph that I drew not very well a couple weeks ago, where I said, hey, here's the actual tax rate and here's where the cap
Yeah,
is, and the
yeah.
differential will be
Yeah.
covered by the state? So the differential of the 143 to 151 is gonna be covered out of state
Okay.
money.
okay,
And to get, if you wanted to say, hey, we wanna go below the cap in our spending, then we'd have to cut at least 3.1 million
Yep.
out of the expense budget.
and then we would receive it.
Then we would receive the cap, and then if you said, hey, we only want 4% or 2% of the tax rate, I gave you in my email that every $376,000 gets a penny off the tax rate.
Yep.
So I could sit here and just say, so tell me what you want the tax rate, I want $1.40. We'd start telling you how much the cuts are.
Bill,
Yeah.
Bree has just uncovered a useful talking point, I think, about the actual tax rate pre-merger to now. I don't know if you want to articulate that.
So, it was a chart that I created back last year, showing the education tax rate, which is the figure that we have control over. Before we were merged, the tax rate in the different entities were $1.45, $1.42, city, town, Fairfield, I don't know which one is which. And FY '24 tax rate was $1.36. So it was almost 10 cents less than it was before we were merged. So we have kept the tax rate down since we merged.
And then, as I said to you last time we showed you those numbers, the education tax rate, the highest we saw as a merger, and maybe you can tell me if it's the same on that chart, I believe was $1.49.
Yes.
We're still not at the highest tax rate we've seen as a merge, with
Right.
what we're going with the cap. If you remember that bar graph, and I didn't bring it this time, I had it at the last meeting, and if this is what we're going through, I'll reproduce it for the next meeting. It's the CLA that's been increasing the actual tax rate. Now, I will say this, and I don't mean it to put us in a negative place, but most taxpayers, they don't care about CLA, education tax rate.
Right.
They care about what's on the bill.
Right.
And they care about the tax rate that's there. And so we can say that. I think we're just saying where the drivers are from, and most people I hear about when they say about taxes is like, like, it seems like we're trying to slide behind some technicality. But I think it is good to point out that we've been able to keep the costs lower. It's what it has been, and what is good about Franklin County. John does some volunteer work in his town, and he said everyone's jealous of Franklin County, especially St. Albans, because of the growth that's happening here. So our CLA's gone. Why does our CLA go down? Because we've grown a lot. We're paying for it.
Can you send us?
We'll get you a new one.
Okay.
We'll get you an update, because you've always asked for that every year.
Yeah.
We just didn't produce those things for tonight.
I think like you did the last time when you did the presentation for us, you put the dates on there. I think that that's also really helpful, because people also need to understand when we get what information.
Oh,
because
when
we're having
we're gonna get, oh.
Because we're having to make this budget, these decisions, based on not a complete understanding of what, of how it can change. And just like you said, Bill, the yield is what really, what I said before.
It's the biggest factor.
Trying to understand this, it's like we seem to be okay, and then we hit the yield, and we have no say over that.
Right.
So it just, that, I think, is another teaching point to the community as to when you receive that information and what we have control over versus what we don't have control over. And the fact that we don't even get that information until May. And we are expected to have these budgets created and voted on in
By
March.
Well,
Well,
you
right,
guys
right,
have
right,
to do
sorry.
it by mid-January.
But, yes, the
Yes.
taxpayers have to, so I mean, just,
Yes.
that's all really important information for people to understand.
Absolutely.
So,
Sorry.
are there people that,
So, my feeling is this, there have been some things that have hit education that we have no control over. We had COVID. We have students coming back from a COVID situation that are more difficult to manage behaviorally and academically because of what the kids went through and what all the teachers and staff went through. We've had the ESSER funds going away, yet because of what I just said about kids and staff and so forth, they need the support, so we need to keep that in there. The weighted system is new. It looks like it's gonna cost a little bit more. It's probably the right thing to do, but it's a new thing. So I don't think we can, I think we need to support what's been presented. I mean, this is my opinion, because I think our staff and kids deserve it. As a grandfather, I want to see my granddaughter get the best education we can provide. And I think we need to support it, but we need to also understand that what taxpayers get in their bill, like Bill said, not to make fun, but what they see is their bill. I mean, I see my bill. They also need to understand there is some income sensitivity. We need to point that out to people. There are people like me that pay the full amount, and that, I'm glad to do it. I also see something as a father. My daughter, who's a teacher in Delaware, has 30 kids in her class. Has 140 students a day. She makes good money because their salaries are way up there, but over time, the teachers have more and more kids in their class because they've had to restructure based on economics and so forth. I don't want to go there. I don't want to see our children in classes with 30 students. So on a family thing, I see and I hear, and she doesn't complain. She's a great teacher. She's been teacher of the year and all this. But she says it is difficult when you have 30 kids in a class, times 6 or 7 classes a day. And so, I don't wanna see us go there. I want to support this budget, is what I'm saying, in my opinion.
Other people's
I,
thoughts?
I,
Go, Charlie.
yeah, I would agree with Jack for the most part on that. I think it seems to me like it's probably in our best interest to go forward with this budget. And one of the things that we really need to be thinking about over the next few years is the idea of sustainability, because we can't just cruise to 2030 and then have double-digit tax increases. So we have to figure out a way that we can, in future years, given the sort of grace period that we've got in future years, manage to kind of level things off a bit, both in the budget and also, in terms of, having enough staff to keep, to keep the schools open, drawing in, valued educators and staff to keep the schools going. I think it's going to be a real challenge over the next few years to put together a model that is going to keep us where we want to be. So that would be something that I think we really have to think about. But for between now and January, when we have to vote on this, I think what we have right now is probably the best case scenario that we have.
Anyone else?
I mean, I agree. I think that after this next year, when we see what the equalized pupil looks like in real time, we'll have more information next year to make changes to get back down that way. There's just so many unknowns right now that I think this looks like the best step forward this year.
So, the message to you is that we're gonna go forward with this second, since I haven't heard from Nilda, what are you thinking?
I'm agree.
Okay.
Okay, I hear the message of we'll leave this budget, and that talks about, I'm gonna kind of jump to, I may be jumping the agenda, let me look. We had talking about board meetings, you and I, Nilda, Susan and I, when we were meeting Monday, prepping for the meeting. So I think.
I happened to be there too, remember?
Yeah,
I said all three of you. I did say your name. The three of us talked about if you wanted to change, that we would need an extra week. But that means I think we still just meet on the first and third. Keep in reserve, everyone should still keep the second week of January in reserve in case we need something. But we could do some board education next meeting if we wanted to, too.
Yeah, so I think that if everyone has questions, get them to Bill so he has an idea of what we need in terms of education about the budget.
Yeah, and Erin's been here listening tonight just because she wants to help with producing materials for all of you and trying to give you pieces to help as well.
Okay.
I think Martha's, green slide there works perfectly fine. If you could, do the math steps on the side and just have, maybe a couple of glossary items, in terms of, definitions, especially the yield and dates of when we get information, but otherwise, I don't think we need any more information.
I really liked the bar graph that showed the CLA on that graph.
Okay.
Yep.
And we'll get the historical one. I think I know which one Bree's was looking at right on that slide.
Yeah, that would be great to have.
So even if we are kind of in agreement here, I think we should definitely have a date for board education. I know I want it, just to be better versed in what we're talking about. So
go ahead.
do you want to jam that into January 3rd and 17th, or you don't want to do anything with the 10th?
No, I was going right where you were, Nilda. I was gonna say, let's meet next week. And then if we wanna have a board
Next
2 weeks, sorry, on the 3rd, let's meet on the 3rd. Yeah, next week I hope everyone's doing something different on Wednesday night. But on the 3rd we meet, and then we could talk about a board education, where there's just board education happening. There's, you know, and we can do that just as we have with other board education, so it's a meeting about education under the law, we can do that. And we give some education, and, you know, we can really discuss it and fine tooth those questions, and we have support, staff support there, I'm thinking Martha and Bree and myself. And, really give you, and probably Aaron as well, with we'll give you some graphs and some things to work with to help it keep it, but that would, you know, be able to give you those pieces and do that the 2nd week of January.
Yes.
So maybe that's how we use that that meeting on the 2nd week.
Because I will have some newer numbers, maybe not too many of them on the 3rd, because there's not too many work days in between. But by the 10th, we should have pretty close to final numbers on that date.
Yeah. So if we can all reserve those, as we had asked a couple months ago, keep those 3 Wednesdays clear. And let's pencil in that there is a meeting on the 10th.
That does not need to be warned because
It's board education.
board education.
Yep.
All right.
In terms of communicating the budget, one of the things that would be helpful to me is if we can, and I don't think it's possible to eliminate the technical jargon entirely, but if we can try to figure out ways to minimize the amount of technical jargon we use in our explanations. I know if I mention common level appraisal to most people when we're talking about taxes, I'm immediately going to get their eyes glazing over and kind of lose it a bit. I don't know that we can get jargon free because it's such a complex thing, but if we can work on trying to trying to explain it like someone just as though the person that we're talking to has no idea about, you know, tax code and things like that. If we can try to put it in as in common terms as possible. In my other job, I run a workshop where, you know, one of the communication exercises is try to explain baseball to someone who doesn't know the sport. Something kind of along those levels. If we can try to get it to as much basic language as possible, that would be very helpful.
Yep.
Like a list of definitions.
No, but I think even easier, like if we wouldn't be saying common level appraisal, but after we figure out what the tax rate is for the school system, there's an adjustment because of the rapid increase in property values. And most people understand that, or the rapid cost of housing, or something like that. I see Charlie give me a nod, so.
Yeah, that gets closer to, sorry, that gets closer to what I'm looking for is a glossary is a good step, but if we, you know, if a lot of these conversations are just going to happen as conversations where we don't get to hand out a glossary, so if we can get it to terms that you that you don't have to explain and that people can understand, you know, and talking about like property value explosions is a good way to equate in that regard.
Yeah, we'll work on that, because I think you're exactly right, Charlie, and that's advice that we've been given, is actually get all the educational ease out of our explanations.
Alrighty.
So we'll be meeting on the 3rd,
Yep.
and the 10th, and the 17th.
All right. So I'm gonna move on, and given the time limits, I think I'm gonna table 7B, which is the state facilities assessment. You have that in your packet, and I think,
We'll talk about that probably as we get through the budget.
Yeah.
Yep.
all right, so 7C is a plan for meeting board goals. And I would like, Jack, I understand that you went to a meeting or a workshop that talked about, so the last goal that we really need to work on is coming up with a robust board orientation. I understand that at the last meeting you went to a workshop on that, and I'm wondering if you could speak to that during the second meeting in January.
Certainly.
And
Okay.
I'd be glad to help you, since you and I sat there together.
Yep.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So next item, it's an action item, and it's the option-based response for violent violent intruders drills, fire drills, emergency preparedness policy the second reading or adoption. So I'd like to make a motion that we adopt F03, options-based response to violent intruder drills, fire drills, and emergency preparedness policy that was warned at the December 6th meeting. If there's a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Susie. And discussion on that. Any discussion?
I would just reiterate, everybody, last time, there's a lot of this was language changes that came since you adopted this back in August.
Okay.
From VSBA and joint fiscal, the legislators' legal office.
Alrighty. Okay, so, I'm gonna take a vote, and I don't know if Nilda left for a minute, so I'm going to ask Charlie.
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Joanna?
Yes.
Susan is a yes. Susie?
Yes.
Amanda?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes,
Carly?
Yes.
Alright, and I don't see Nilda up there, so let's move forward. Alright, moving on to, new business. And we are gonna be looking for possible action. So the administration recommends a motion to approve the early retirement requests of
Jim Hill.
and Mary Brulette.
Brulette.
So, I'm gonna make that motion, if someone would second that,
I'll second that.
okay, discussion. And I wish Nilda was here.
Yeah. So you have a side letter, that you have with the association that, asks for all early retirement requests to be put in by October 1st of the year. We received 2 this past, and, I wish Nilda were here too, because the 3 of us had a pretty.
She just came on.
She just came on, oh, good. Good. The 3 of us had a discussion about, should this come to the board or not, and after some detailed reading of the side letter, we agreed that it should come to the board, and so we attached the side letter in there as well. And these 2 requests, you'll see the requests in there, for this retirement, for an early consideration for early retirement.
Nilda, we're discussing, item 8A, early retirement request for Jim Hill and Mary Brulette. You're muted.
My battery died on my iPad, so I had to switch to phone. So I know what we're talking about, yes.
And there were 6 people that you approved the early retirement support from the district back in October. I kind of said stuff, Nilda, I won't rephrase it because I just kind of explained what we talked about in our prep meeting.
Right.
That I went over the letter, the side letter, and that these 2 were received in the past week or so. And that we
Right.
felt it should come to the board to make a decision.
Right. So, I mean, these side letters, just for information, are considered part of the contract. They are items that are not built into the contract for various reasons, but they have to be renegotiated each year. They're not an automatic. So even if we've had these early retirements in the past, contract, when we get together to renegotiate a contract, we always have to re-include a side letter addressing that issue, if both sides agree to. I mean, sometimes we just might not, but it's not automatic. And one of the things that concerns me about this request is this is not new, so that October deadline has been around for a while. And I think it's sad that, somebody had this in their mind, but, didn't apply. On the other hand, I don't think we should mess with the contract like this.
And I
Can you
actually,
hear me, or was
Yeah,
I talking to the air?
no, you're not talking, we
Okay.
can hear you.
Thank you.
And I agree with that, Nilda. I don't know what other people's feelings are on this.
Well, in one of the letters we have, it strikes me that there's something in the mitigating circumstances due to the flooding that happened over the summer. I don't know if that is something that that folks would consider. I guess that would follow an insurance policy act of God, or a reasonable excuse. But that the fact that they weren't able to meet with someone and discuss their retirement options until after the deadline, I think is worth consideration.
And I guess
They're just sending this in December 10th. They're just letting you know now instead of October.
yes.
And they should have let you know in October.
So one was December 10th and one was just this Monday. Looks like, might be wrong on that. Joanne, were you gonna?
I mean, I understand, yeah. I'm torn, I'm always torn about stuff like this because I understand the need for deadlines and I also understand that if somebody's ready to go, then that person's ready to go, and to keep them on further is not necessarily for the betterment of anyone, especially in the current times.
Any other discussion or?
Well, I
David?
think in that situation, sorry,
David, I'm gonna let
sorry, I can't see who's talking, so
Yeah,
I apologize.
so it's David.
If you change the contract, the terms of the contract, does that violate then the contract? I mean, you know, you've got a contract, you've got an agreement in place, I guess, with the teachers' union, and this is what we've all agreed to. And so then if all of a sudden we say, well, we're gonna make an exception to that, does that create some kind of, well, then we gotta make all kinds of exceptions?
Well, I think it probably sets precedent, but I think it's up to the board. Like, if there are circumstances like this, it really needs to come before the board. So that is
It's
why we're
really
here
up to
today.
the board, I mean, it's not gonna affect any.
Things that come in after.
Well, I think, you know, I think about my work with the association, and there is the contract, and, you know, the way the letter reads is it's up to you to, it's up to, when I say you, the global you of the board, the plural you, of, you know, how many you wanna offer, and that you'll have requests by October 1st. I know there has been history, I don't know how many years past, but it's many, many years past when this board has the previous board did accept one past October 1st. But then, you know, I don't like the word precedent, but then you give the impression of like, do we really mean October 1st or not? And I'm not saying that to say you should not do it or you should do it, it's just, those are the considerations of the board. Do I think you're overturning the whole contract? No, but I think if the clearer we can be to what's written in the contract, helps our relationship.
Joe?
Can you tell us how many you've already approved?
6, you approved 6.
And would we, it's up to?
It's up to 8, up to 8,
It's 8, okay.
up to 8.
Okay. So we wouldn't be surpassing our normal allotment.
Any other discussion?
I think what Bill said, as far as you mean that date or not, is kind of a good point, because we put those dates in those contracts and in those side letters for a reason, and, you know, it's to continue doing business as far as, you know, making sure that we have a budget, making sure that we have a contract in place and all those other things. And I don't mean to sound heartless here, because I understand the issue, but I also worry about and I hate the word precedents too, but I worry about doing something like this and then having it come back in 2 years. Well, in 2023, you guys did this, and, there's time between, summer and October 1st to contact the Department of Taxes or whoever, teacher retirement, who manages that, and find out your numbers. I don't know.
Anyone else? Are we ready to vote? All right, I'm gonna take a vote, and I just wanna remind people that by voting yes, we will accept the motion to approve the early retirement request for Mary Roulette and Jim Hill, and if we vote no, we are basically not approving it. So, Nilda,
No.
Charlie,
Yes.
Jess,
Yes.
David,
No.
Joanna,
Yes.
I'm gonna vote no. Suzanne,
Yes.
Amanda,
No.
Jack,
No.
and Carly.
Yes.
All right, so. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5 votes. So we have 4.5 votes for yes. And then 1, 2. Oh my, how does this work?
You and I canceled each
You canceled your 4.5, 4.5.
We mean nothing.
3,
It's a tie.
yeah, it's a tie. So.
I was just gonna say, it's gotta be 4.5 to 4.5, because
I know, but I,
we got none.
I don't know that we've had one of those
Right.
before.
It's your fault. Now? Does Mike
So,
decide?
arm wrestling match?
Mike decides.
I would like to just have one thing considered, without taking a side on the points that you've made that are very valid and they're yours to decide. And I would ask Martha to weigh in on the projected savings of having those
Absolutely.
positions filled. When you're talking money tonight, by granting that money, the amount of money saved potentially, and that would be a Martha question.
I was thinking that too.
Martha, if you calculate it, 'cause I know you and I talked before.
To know the exact or
Yeah.
just a ballpark,
Our ballpark was under 10,000,
yeah.
a $10,000 savings?
under $10,000 savings
Year one.
for the 3 years. Because it's 3 years of payouts.
No, it's just one
It's
payout.
just one.
It's one payout, it's one
Yeah.
payout, year one.
So year one.
So year one, we.
Is that under 10,000 each or under 10,000 for both?
Each.
Each. That's what we've been trending.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter to these people, that's kind of what we've been trending.
Well, the other side to Mike's question is, if we were hypothetically taking their offer, late as it is, would we have to fill those positions?
We have people to do that.
And, I mean, you don't have to answer that, I'm just throwing that out there. If we had to backfill those positions, we'd have to offer a salary that was, reasonable for the person that applied, so what's the gain? I don't know.
I'm guessing, I might be wrong
So
on
can I
this.
give you a
Yeah.
point of order? I'm not one to do that for you,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, we have a-
you have a tie vote, which means you haven't passed it.
Oh, that's right.
So if you want to do something, you need to bring it back at another meeting,
Okay,
under Robert's
It has
rules.
to come back at another meeting?
Yes, it
Not
does.
just another
Yeah, at another meeting, a tie is a defeat of a motion.
Oh, shit.
Thanks, Keith.
That's not PG, Keith.
all right, so, I guess I'm gonna I guess, you know, they're all valid points about the finances. It looks like we'd save about $10,000, less than 10,000 each that first year. The question is, are we gonna, you know?
Susan,
Yep,
just to point something out, you actually save that money progressively each year.
explain that.
Okay, let's say somebody makes 80,000.
Yeah.
And you hire somebody that makes 50,000.
Right, okay, that's where I was.
Okay?
Yeah.
It's not just 1 year. You would save that money
Right.
over time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So early retirement
Meaning-
is a good thing for the board.
Meaning because the person we hire in is likely gonna be at a significantly, or a less salary, maybe.
Well, that's part of it, but the other part that Martha and I have seen, she and I have fun debates, and wherever you wanna say we have the debates, but, usually folks that come in, the people that are leaving, usually their benefits aren't as expensive as those that come in or later. It's not a total trend, but family plans come faster, and then they tend to trend off. I don't know that for the I don't know, and I say that unknowing these two employee benefit package at all.
Yep.
I have no knowledge.
Meaning myself, I have a family plan at the hospital, but once the youngest turns 26, I'll be going to just myself and my husband.
Right,
Okay.
right, just like that. That's what I mean, that those
Yeah.
things change. And I have no knowledge of these two people at all.
Yeah. So either way, it sounds like we need to bring this back at the next board meeting. Alrighty, so, yes, Nilda,
Yeah,
did you have
yeah, no, I said yes, I agreed with you.
okay, alright. Alright, so other business, the board recommends, a motion to approve the warrants acknowledging that the passage of this motion will act as authorization and signature of any individual board members participating remotely. So I'm gonna make that motion if someone would, second it. Second.
I'll second
Okay,
that.
alrighty. Nilda,
Yes.
Charlie. Charlie, you're muted.
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Joanna?
Yes.
Susan? Yes. Suzanne?
Yes.
Amanda?
Yes.
Jack? And
Yes.
And Carly?
Yes.
Okay. All right, superintendent's report.
I have a bunch of little things. Some of these I sent you an email, but I think they're good to, just to point out. Last Friday at Fairfield, we had to close the school due to staff absences. Kelsey happens to be here, but I remember the phone conversation with her that morning. It was, if we took every staff member that could be at school and doubled up 2 classrooms, we could open. That's how far down they were with illnesses. And it was either the staffs themselves or their children that they needed to take care of. So that's why we closed on Friday. There was just no way to safely operate the school. So if we had had a student elopement, which means a student running out of the school, we wouldn't have had someone to follow the student. That was that's, you know, people ask, when do you close schools? When it's not safe to operate. So, and then as you saw on the 11th, we had a snow day. I will tell you, in the morning, driving in, I was like, oh, I really wonder if that was a smart decision that I missed one. And then about an hour or two later, I was really glad we did. So it's just, those can be the kind of things. And as you probably saw, some of our colleagues in different parts of the state, right around where I live especially, flooding has been an issue. And I know at my wife's high school, they had the waters right up to the road into the high school. So Montpelier almost shut down their whole system. Again, so.
Again,
Again. I don't know who else, I didn't see any of you last night, doesn't mean you weren't there, because I got there late to the fine arts, but it was tremendous. Zach, thanks for the kids that you get from City.
Thank you.
I love the end of it and I should say thank you to all the music teachers, not just Zach, because it's a district event. But it's so symbolic when all the students from all the schools get up on the risers in that chorus, and they're there from the schools. And Armand Messier does a great job of saying, this is Make Her Run Choir. And they're all singing 2 songs together. And I think that's just such strong symbolism of what we do in the district. And it's all orchestrated by the music teachers. They do an awesome job doing it. And I just was really, really proud to stand there and see the talents of our students. So if you missed it, I strongly encourage you to get to a concert, band or choir. Or there were fine arts performance that were on display, and the musical did some of their scenes. And I think I captured everything that was there. I might have forgotten. I'm kind of looking at you, Zach, to think, did I get everything?
I think the wide breadth of the visual arts department,
Yeah.
I can't emphasize enough how great it is at VFA.
Yeah. I told you about the leadership teamwork we're doing right now. We're looking at that. And they left, and I meant to congratulate Cooper O'Connell was here, and Leah Fitzgerald. Cooper had a great piece on CAX. He's quite the entrepreneur. He's into a second business now that he started, an antique shop. I'm sure he'd love to sell you something. And then Leah talked, she was in the Messenger today about her work at Tim's house, and that was featured. So we're on break next week. Everyone deserves it. So, and I wish everyone a really restful, recharging break. So, and you did that board by saying, let's keep this where it is, and kept the leadership team on and have to come together during break. So, I thank you. That's it.
All right, so board announcements. I actually have a couple. I actually talked with Leah, and you know what's very clear to me is, you know, the experience that she got at Tim's house. You can't get that necessarily sitting in a classroom, and it was pretty amazing listening to her. Anyways, I want to say thank you to Angela and Jason for having us here. Thank you. And then we need to think about who's up for election and who might be running again. So it looks like Carly, Jessica, David, Nelda, and myself are going to be up for election this coming year. And so we need to, you know, people need to think about, if you're not going to run, letting people know. You need a petition of at least 30 signatures. Do you know when by?
It's 60 signatures.
60 signatures?
Yeah.
And it's
I think it says, the 29th.
29th of
Okay.
January. Yeah. So I am going to say that Sure, did someone say something? Charlie?
Oh, yeah, is that 60 signatures a change?
I think it was I think it's been 60, but I think during COVID maybe, we didn't either need to get them, or maybe it wasn't as many.
And Charlie, I'm gonna look into that a little bit, because what Jess told me is 60, Carly and I were talking, the VSBA is saying it's 30. But I wanna make sure that that's correct, so we'll have
I've only heard 30 also.
yeah.
And Aaron said it was
Aaron's
60
saying
too.
No, I talked to I have an email from the town clerk
You
saying
do?
60. Yep.
I wanna.
Is it because it's a unified
It's a
district?
merged
as opposed to
district,
a
okay.
school district?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. But one of the things to remember is you can get signatures from anybody that is part of Maple Run. So it can be city, town, Fairfield residents that are registered voters. So, you know, it used to be that if you were a St. Albans City resident, you had to go get St. Albans City people to sign your petition. And now it's wide open.
Everyone.
And are seats designated 2 years and 3 years, or is everybody the same?
So,
So can I?
Yep.
So for those of you that were appointed, you have taken a seat, if you're gonna run for that seat, you're taking a seat that has so many years left. I'd have to look at the person that you replaced them when they were elected and when their term was up. So if they were elected, let's say they were elected in March and they left, this would have been their first year of and they were on a first year of a 3-year term, so there's 2 more years left. If they had done 1.5 years of a 3-year term, so there'd be a year left. So we have to look at those individual pieces, and we can help you with that.
And I don't think I'm gonna be running again next year, so I think, thinking about that, like I've already started to think about, okay, who in the community, so, I just think it's important to kind of consider if we're not gonna run, drumming up support for someone that might like to run. That's all for me. Anyone else? Any other board announcements?
Kind of circling back to what I mentioned last time, is I went to see Dinosaurs Before Dark, which was the fourth grade or fourth grade play for City School, and it was a ton of fun, and the kids had just a lot of energy, and if when those plays come around, they're totally worth spending an evening to go see.
Thank you. Anyone else? Alrighty, I do not believe there's any need for an executive session, which means I'm gonna adjourn this meeting at 8:26 p.m.